In 2025, millions of people across the United Kingdom are bracing themselves for changes to the financial support they rely on to keep warm through the coldest months of the year. For years, the winter fuel payment has been a lifeline for pensioners, a payment designed to take some of the burden off heating bills when temperatures drop and the cost of living rises. But this year, a major announcement from the Department for Work and Pensions has shaken many households, as officials have confirmed that not everyone who once qualified will continue to receive it. The $300 help, which so many elderly people were counting on to ease the crushing weight of high energy costs, will now be denied to specific groups. It is not simply a reduction or a temporary delay. It is a clear and confirmed change in policy. And for those affected, it feels like the rug has been pulled out from under them at the worst possible time. The first reaction from pensioners has been one of disbelief. After all, the winter fuel payment was something many considered untouchable, a guaranteed right for those who had contributed all their lives and now needed some support in return. For decades, people worked, paid taxes, raised families, and believed that at the very least, when they reached retirement, they would not be left to freeze in their own homes. But now, as the DWP sets new rules, the message is stark. Not everyone will get this help, and some will be cut off entirely. The government has argued that the new system is about fairness, about targeting resources to those most in need. But critics argue that the decision leaves vulnerable people facing hardship, and it is already sparking heated debate across the country. Imagine being 75 years old, living on a fixed pension, with bills piling up. You have no way of increasing your income, no job to fall back on, and every winter you worry about how to heat your home without falling into debt. That $300 winter fuel payment might not seem like much to some, but for someone in that situation, it can mean the difference between comfort and suffering, between living in a warm home or sitting in the cold wrapped in blankets. Now, picture that support suddenly being taken away because you fall into one of the excluded categories. It feels less like a policy adjustment and more like a personal punishment, especially when you've done nothing wrong. The government insists these exclusions are necessary. In fact, they've laid out very specific rules about who will no longer qualify. The changes are not random. They are based on technical definitions of residency, benefits, and legal status. For example, those who live outside England and Wales won't see the winter fuel payment this year. That means pensioners in Scotland, despite facing some of the harshest winters in the UK, are cut off from the DWP's scheme because Scotland runs its own winter heating payment program. While ministers argue that Scotland's devolved powers should take responsibility for its residents, many Scottish pensioners feel abandoned, pointing out that their payments under the Scottish scheme are often lower and less flexible compared to what they previously received through the DWP. Another group left out are those who, during the qualifying week, find themselves in hospital or prison. The DWP has set strict dates for eligibility, and if you happen to spend that week in hospital receiving free treatment or in prison serving a sentence, you lose your chance to claim. To the government, it makes sense not to hand over extra heating support to someone who isn't at home paying energy bills during that time. But life isn't always so straightforward. What about someone admitted to hospital unexpectedly? Someone battling illness who has no control over the timing? Should they really be punished financially for being unwell during the wrong week? Critics say this is one of the cruelest aspects of the policy, one that punishes people for circumstances entirely beyond their control. The situation for care home residents is just as complex, if not more so. Elderly people who live in care homes and receive means-tested benefits and who have been there since before June of this year are also excluded from the winter fuel payment. The DWP argues that because their heating costs are already included in their care arrangements, they don't need the payment. But the reality is rarely that simple. Many care home residents still have personal expenses, still face additional charges, and still feel the loss of that extra $300 acutely. Families who were relying on that money to cover essentials for their loved ones now face having to stretch already tight budgets even further. The pain is not just financial, it is emotional too, as elderly residents feel singled out and forgotten by the very system that was supposed to protect them. And then there is the group whose immigration status prevents them from claiming public funds. These are people who may have lived in the UK for years, even decades, contributing in their own way, but because their right to remain carries a restriction on accessing public benefits, they are automatically barred from receiving the winter fuel payment. For many, this feels deeply unfair. They live in the same communities, face the same rising energy bills, endure the same freezing winters, yet because of a line in their immigration paperwork, they are excluded. Campaigners argue that this is a heartless policy that prioritizes legal technicalities over human dignity, and that it risks leaving some of the most vulnerable people in the cold, literally. The DWP's announcement has stirred anger, not just among pensioners, but also among advocacy groups, charities, and even some politicians. Fuel poverty has been a growing crisis in the UK for years, with rising energy costs and inflation pushing more and more households into impossible choices. Do you heat your home or do you eat? Do you pay the gas bill or do you cut back on essentials like food and medicine? These are the brutal questions that many pensioners now face, and removing the $300 winter fuel payment only deepens the struggle. Charities warn that this winter could see more older people at risk of illness or even death due to cold homes, a problem that Britain has battled for decades but which is now, once again, front and center. For the government, the justification is all about targeting. Ministers argue that money should go only to those who truly need it, and that by tightening eligibility, they can ensure the most vulnerable pensioners continue to get help while saving taxpayers' money. But the reality on the ground tells a different story. The new exclusions are sweeping, and they catch people who may not be rich or comfortable, but who still fall just outside the lines the DWP has drawn. Someone living in a care home might not pay their own gas bill, but that doesn't mean they don't face financial hardship. Someone who happens to be in hospital during the qualifying week may still come home to steep energy bills afterward. These nuances are lost in the rigid rules, and ordinary people are left to pay the price. There is also the question of trust. Pensioners are asking, if the government can cut the winter fuel payment for certain groups this year, what will stop them from cutting it for more people in the future? Once a benefit that seemed guaranteed is shown to be vulnerable to policy changes, nothing feels secure anymore. It breeds a sense of insecurity and anxiety among elderly people, who now fear that their already limited support could shrink even further in the coming years. This uncertainty is devastating, especially for those who are already living on the edge financially. Beyond the immediate financial impact, there is the psychological toll. Elderly people who are told they no longer qualify feel as though society has abandoned them, as if their decades of contributions and sacrifices mean nothing. Being told you don't deserve the same support as others because of where you live, because of your health situation during a specific week, or because of a technical clause in your immigration status sends a harsh message. You are less important. This is the hidden cost of the DWP's policy, one that cannot be measured in pounds, but is nonetheless very real. As winter approaches, the debate is only heating up. Energy companies are warning of further price fluctuations, charities are launching campaigns to highlight the plight of pensioners, and politicians are being pressed to explain how cutting support in the middle of a cost of living crisis can be justified. Some argue that alternative schemes, like Scotland's winter heating payment, should be expanded or reformed to fill the gaps. Others say the government must rethink its decision altogether, reinstating universal support rather than creating complicated exclusions that leave some pensioners out in the cold. What is clear is that the issue is not going away, and that the anger felt by those affected will continue to grow as the temperatures drop. Families across the country are already making plans, cutting corners, and bracing for what lies ahead. For those who will no longer receive the winter fuel payment, the message is clear. They must somehow find a way to make up the difference on their own. But with pensions often barely covering essentials and inflation eating into every pound, that is easier said than done. Many are worried, some are frightened, and all are asking the same question. Why us? Why now? Why take away help at a time when it is needed most? The truth is that the $300 winter fuel payment is more than just money. It is a symbol of care, a recognition that older people deserve dignity and warmth in their later years. Taking it away from certain groups sends a chilling signal about priorities, about who matters and who doesn't. And while the DWP insists it is about fairness and efficiency, those who feel the cold this winter will remember only the loss. The policy may balance budgets on paper, but in reality, it risks leaving many pensioners feeling poorer, lonelier, and more vulnerable than ever before.